Hey, welcome to another episode of the InNOLEvation Mindset Podcast, powered by the Jim Moran College of Entrepreneurship. I am Mark McNees, your host, and in studio today we have Joanne Gallagher, the founder and CEO of SOAR. Hey, Joanne, thanks for coming in. I really appreciate it. Tell us a little bit about SOAR and what you do, just a brief overview.
Sure, and thank you very much for having me here. SOAR is a Tallahassee-based management consulting firm. SOAR is short for Strategic Optimization and Research. And we really do two things. First, we do all of the professional credentialization for project managers, change managers, agile principles and practices. And now we're actually getting into AI and generative AI and doing courses on that as well.
Okay, great.
The other thing that we do, obviously, having been a management consultant all of my life, is we do management consulting work. And we typically team with either large companies, like some of the big four, or we do work on our own that is management consulting oriented, solution oriented, with a smaller team for 6 to 12 months on the ground.
Okay, great. So we were speaking earlier. You're relatively a new company, a few years old. Tell us a little bit about your background, like where you're from. Did you have any entrepreneurial influences growing up? How did you get to Tallahassee, or were you already here? And tell us a little bit about your career before you decided to soar.
Sure. It's a bit of a complicated route. I'm originally from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, obviously, and you will hear the accent along the way. I'm a dual citizen now. I'm proudly a dual citizen of the U.S. and Canada. And I was working with Deloitte Consulting, which is obviously one of the big four in Toronto, Ontario, after having finished my degrees in Ottawa. And they transferred me to Pennsylvania. I specialized in health and human service transformation, so child welfare, child support, integrated eligibility, which is commonly called, the welfare system as well, and then obviously expanded to workforce development. So those were my specializations. When I was in Pennsylvania, I met my husband there. He was a police officer in Philadelphia, and unfortunately he became, after several years of living there, married to him, he became ill with cancer. So when that happened, we moved to Tallahassee, Florida, and that was 12 or 13 years ago.
Okay, I got to ask, so cancer diagnosis,
yes.
Moved to Tallahassee. Why Tallahassee?
One of my projects with Deloitte was the Department of Children and Families. So I was the project manager over that some of the Florida access work there. And I did that, I think, for 2.5 years before I went to Austin, Texas. So I traveled a lot, been to a lot of different states doing a lot of work, management consulting work. But while I was here, I made some really very good friends in the community. And so when Glenn became ill, I said to him, he was actually having difficulty regulating his body temperature. And I said, well, I think we have to go south. Pennsylvania is going to be too cold. So where are we headed? And he said, what about Tallahassee? And I said, why? Because I thought he was going to say Atlanta or somewhere that I could continue doing, pretty high level work. But he talked about the community in Tallahassee, the people here. And
what was his connection?
Well, because I had been doing work here at the Department of Children and Families for 2 years, I didn't always go home to Pennsylvania after a long week's work. So sometimes he would travel here, and we got to meet some of the local folks.
Okay.
And we developed friendships here. Not a lot of them. I had exactly 3 friends when we moved back when he was ill. But I'll tell you, the community certainly surrounded me, and I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I feel very privileged to live here.
Wow, that's incredible. What year was that?
He passed away in 2012, so I think it was 2011, the end of 2011, that we moved here. And, yeah.
And did he pass away from the cancer?
Yeah, that's how he passed
away. What type
away.
of cancer was it?
It was colon cancer, so there's my ask for everyone to be doing their colonoscopies on time. So that, unfortunately, was one of the leading causes of cancer. One of the leading types of cancer is colon cancer. So, but he passed with that. But I was surrounded by a very kind community, and really, I had 18 months to have a very good conversation with him. management consulting work affords you the flexibility of when you're working very intensely and sometimes when you back away from it. And I was provided with that opportunity during his passing.
No, that's great. My mom passed this year from pancreatic cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And FSU was kind enough. I'm from California, and they were kind enough to allow me to switch all my classes to online. And I got to spend the last 4 weeks of her life with her and caring for her. And then my parents were married over 60 years, 63 years. So I got to spend the next 4 weeks with my dad, just helping him adjust. And it's a hard journey, but I'm so grateful that FSU allowed me, and my dean Fiorito allowed me to be with her and then be with my dad during those times. And I've told her it's a gift she gave me that I could never repay.
Absolutely. That was in California then, I guess.
Yeah, I was in California. I was in California for 2 months and just went through the process. And
it's difficult, but it's a privilege, isn't it?
It is, and I was just so happy. It was good when she passed. She was in a lot of pain and agony, and it wasn't her anymore. They just had her so drugged up and everything, and to try to manage the pain. And it was tough. I mean, it was tough, but there was a sense of relief when she passed. And then it's been interesting. My attention has shifted so much to my dad and like trying to care for him now.
It's a good son.
And in a lot of ways, and I feel weird saying this, but in a lot of ways, it's been harder helping him make that transition because he's really lonely and trying to figure out what life looks like as a single man after being married for over 20 years is a huge transition. So, but yeah, I've gone through it, and cancer is a horrible thing. It touches a lot of people.
I will tell you, when Glenn, just toward the end, when we were in Tallahassee, and Glenn said to me, he turned to me one night when he was recognizing that the end was near. He said, Joanne, I'm so sorry that I will not have the opportunity to see you soar. So I called my company.
Wow.
I mean, obviously I was working as a consultant when I eventually established my own company. I called it's short for Strategic Optimization and Research, SOAR.
That's a mouthful.
So that's why I stick with SOAR, but obviously as a tribute to him as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So so it has a lot of meaning
for sure
to watch you soar. So
Thank you.
That is so cool.
And I have, by the way, I've been really fortunate in owning this company.
Well, let's jump into it. Moving from giants like Deloitte and doing that and the corporate system to actually starting your own thing. Kind of what was your sweet spot, your initial vision of okay, you know what, this is what I'm really good at, this is what I'm passionate about, and this is what the market needs. How did you come to that, and how did you end up packaging what SOAR was going to offer?
So a previous client of mine, remember I had worked in the state of Florida as a consultant, as a management consultant before. So a previous client of mine came to me with a troubled project. She had remembered me, and she said, I really need you to help untangle some of the areas that were having some risks and some problems. And I figured then that, and I always really wanted to open my own company, but that takes a lot of courage.
Yes, it does.
And when she said, I really have a position for you for the next 2 years, I thought if I was ever going to jump, I was going to jump then.
Yeah.
So I did it. I finally jumped. But I will tell you, my experience is a lot different from what I had fantasized. I would say from an infrastructure perspective, I don't think I recognized the amount of infrastructure that supported me as a senior manager with Deloitte, as a director also with KPMG. I finished with KPMG as well. the infrastructure on, for example, interviewing individuals. So I didn't realize that maybe I was getting the top 5% of resumes that had come in. Well, it's me now that sifts through all of that to find that potential 5 or 10% of the, the cream that you want basically ultimately to hire.
That's funny. It's the opposite for me. So I got my first W-2 at 47. Every company, every job I've ever had, I either was born into or I started myself. And FSU is my first job. I came here when I was 47, and I'm used to doing everything myself. I'm a bootstrapper, and
I like that.
But it's got me in hot water a lot of times because I figure it out, and I don't realize there's 10,000 people here who can help me.
Right.
I'm just not used to that.
I think it's humbling to. What did you mean by when you first started your first job?
This is my first job.
Oh, this is your first W-2.
Job that I'm a W-2, like I'm an actual employee. I'm not paying self-employment tax or anything. I get my paycheck twice a month, and I pay my taxes on that, and everything's structured. So I went from the other extreme, from just my whole life being basically the largest company that I started and ran was Red Eye Coffee here in town.
Was that you?
Yeah, that's me. I'm the founder of Red Eye Coffee, and we had 80 employees, and that was before the pandemic, and it was through Red Eye that really opened up the doors for me here at FSU. We were a social impact company, and FSU really wanted to start a social entrepreneurship program, and they recruited me. I started part-time doing both for a while, and then the Jim Moran Foundation gave FSU $100 million to start a college, and Dean Fiorito thought that social entrepreneurship should be in her College of Entrepreneurship. So I was invited over, and that's when I became full-time. And it was really, really interesting because, number one, I realized a $100 million startup has just about all the same problems as a $100,000 startup. And you still got to figure everything out. That is just a different scale that we were talking about. But I never dreamed that I'd be a government employee. I never dreamed that I wasn't the best student, so I never dreamed that I would be part of the startup team for a college. But hey, I did it. I'm still here. And
now, have you found that more or less stressful? Because I will tell you, I thought I had a stressful job with the big management consulting firms, and I find that being an entrepreneur is extremely stressful.
Yeah.
Exciting, thrilling, and frightening sometimes.
Yeah, it's a different kind of stress. It really took me a long time to learn, and I'm still learning how to be an employee. I always paid the electric bill. I paid the payroll. And I had to worry about everything from start to finish, and that's not my job here. And the first time I ever heard this line was at FSU. Mark, stay in your lane. I didn't even know what that meant. I thought the whole freeway was my lane. So I had to learn to kind of stay in my sweet spot and realize that the president of FSU really, I've never met him, but I'm sure he's a nice guy and everything. But he my job is not to advise him on how to do things better, and right. Things like that. My job here is to teach students, do a podcast, and do different stuff. So, that part is definitely great. There is, the disruptor in me. I think all entrepreneurs are disruptors by nature, and there's friction, obviously, in any organization when there's a disruptor in the midst. I don't think there's 16 colleges at FSU. I don't think I would have been welcome as long as I've been welcome in the College of Entrepreneurship, just because of the culture of entrepreneurship. Our dean is very innovative. She likes to try things. She likes to do things. That we have a podcast and a podcasting class is because her default mode is, yes, right? It's like, if it makes sense and it's going to help our strategic goals, then, and you can make that case, she's going to say yes.
It's part of the reason why I initiated all of the professional training that I do. I work with global organizations like the Project Management Institute, which is a very common one, obviously, in the Big Four. The Association of Change Management Professionals, which is the Certified Change Management Professional designation. Agile principles and practices, that's commonly used for technology developers, but it can be used, right across the board. It's being able to establish a more rapid way, a more systematic, focused way of being able to develop something to get to what they call a minimum viable product. So something that is beneficial to the end user.
Yeah,
much
we
more
use
quickly.
Agile and we use Lean and those things in the college. We teach those things.
Great, which is why I decided to, at first it was really a management consulting firm, but what I found was any of the credentials that we're offering now is something that I think they said in the next 5 years that there are going to be 30 million positions that won't be vacancies that won't be able to be filled because of a lack or a gap in these particular skills.
And what are those? What are the skills that are going to be needed?
I'm going to say it very tactically, and then I'm going to say it kind of conceptually.
Okay.
First is, from a project management perspective, it's obviously organized planning, identifying risk, being able to identify who your stakeholders are, how much you have to interact with them, what you do versus what you don't say, how you manage projects to stay within particular constraints, dollars expenditures, etc. Change management is really what we're seeing right now, frankly, when we talk about AI, is that it's not the technology that's going to be slowing us down. It's the people's acceptance towards using those new ways of doing business that's going to be the slowdown, right? Yeah. People are resistant. People are afraid of AI. So it's really a matter of identifying how it could benefit them, but at the same time to minimize some of their reluctance or anxiety or overwhelm, so we can shorten the path of adoption.
Yeah, it's been interesting. You can probably imagine in a university setting that there's probably the whole gamut of acceptance of AI, and I'm on one extreme. I'm like, throw the doors wide open. Let's just be transparent about what we're doing, and we'll figure out like how we're going to do it, what's ethical, what's in line, what's not in line. So with my students, I just tell them, I'm like, use AI. And at every project, I say, just let us know how you used it, and we'll all learn from it. And then there's going to be times that we'll all kind of like, we'll have a conversation and go, you know what, that doesn't feel right. We probably should pull back a little bit on that. And it's been some really great conversations on it. I've heard of professors who've gone the complete other way, and they don't even accept electronic submissions anymore, that the students have to handwrite it, which, that's the complete opposite of it. And when I talk to Google executives and people at Deloitte, and all the reading I do is that companies are desperate for people who know how to effectively use AI to increase outcomes. And that's the way I look at it. I look at it as a very powerful tool to help increase outcomes. And I was telling you a little bit about the feedback loop thing that I created for my students, where they can do pre-submission and they can get feedback before they turn it in. And I just thought, I always thought the process of you turn in something, you get a grade, and then you move on. There's no iteration in that. Like, you get it, and they would get it done at the last minute. And what Feedback Loop AI does is it actually gives them a bonus if they iterate early in the week. And then if they use the second iteration, they get another small bonus. But it also gives them what I call alphas and deltas, like what's going well with it. And deltas are, if you were going to iterate, this is what you should focus on for it to do better.
Are the bonuses grade point bonuses?
Yeah, it's like a small grade point bonus. So if they do an iteration, it's sliding. So the better iteration they do, the bigger bonus that they get.
Very
so
so you've introduced the concept of the gamification.
Yes,
That's very cool.
I absolutely have. And this is the first semester that I've implemented it, and it's been received extremely well by my students and a lot of people at the university. It's scared a lot of other people.
Right.
What I really like about it is one of the biggest problems I've always seen in the way that we do it in the university is, again, we don't make a pathway of iteration. And I believe iterating and reiterating, getting feedback and changing, you always come out with better outcomes.
And let me say this. So you talked about AI and the fact that some professors don't want to use it at all, and other ones are welcoming it. It's the tidal wave, the tsunami is here.
Yeah.
So it's really a matter of figuring out the most optimal way of a student learning. I'll tell you, 25 years ago when I came from Canada to the U.S., I remember I was working in Pennsylvania at the time, and there was a really big push on everyone learning how to code. And I remember thinking, and I remember saying, why are we not focusing more on maybe critical thinking or problem solving or those kind of things? Because really, coding is a bit of a commodity. So it's something that you could buy from someone else relatively inexpensively, particularly
or
now.
overseas or something
or
like
overseas, exactly. That's correct.
And now, I mean, I'm not a coder. I did some coding in the 90s and learned HTML and stuff like that, but I haven't done anything with it for 30 years.
Well, and right now, when you think about AI and the way that you've described it, soon coding, prompting, etc., is not going to be as important as they say. We're going to have ways of being able to use AI. Let me give you an example. Right now, the big firms are no longer hiring less entry-level college students. Why would that be? Of course, it's because AI is doing the tasks that historically a younger
interns or young professionals do.
But they're not making redundant the more senior staff. So why would that be?
I mean, I think it's very easy, at least in my mind, is before, like, say I was an executive and I needed a presentation made out of my notes or something, I would give it to a young executive and they would do the hard work of building the PowerPoint deck or something like that, where now I put in the concept into AI and it'll pump out a beautiful deck for me. So that cuts out a whole kind of entry level of young executive.
That's it. What it also does is it emphasizes your particular value proposition, right? Which is potential, how are we growing the company? We can call it professional development, business development, sales, whatever you want to call it. Being able to solution, so taking a number of varied data points and being able to integrate them into a proper solution with whatever the client's problems are, and then being able to execute on that. That's really kind of the human brain that can do that with a level of empathy and compassion and EQ, while you're enabled by these tools that historically have been by more junior staff. So I think, when I talked about tactically and then conceptually, I would say conceptually, AI is something that is probably the biggest opportunity to level the playing field. Because if university students, and I may have said this already, but university students are being hired at a less frequency than individuals that have, for example, the microcredentials that I'm offering at the firm. And the reason for that is because it's very targeted learning. It's globally recognized. There are frameworks that we're following to be able to enhance and establish these critical thinking skills. In essence, that's what project management and change management are. It's the application of a framework to be able to enhance or optimize your critical thinking skills.
Yeah, and it's 100%. I think you see it more and more, and you see big execs and big companies like Google and Tesla not requiring a 4-year degree. They're more interested in what you can do versus if you have a piece of paper. And the university system is, it's still on the agrarian calendar. We're not necessarily, the biggest innovators in the world in some ways. In other ways, in research, and especially in the medical field and things like that, we're extremely innovative, and it's really, really important. But I believe, me personally, just speaking for myself, I believe that the future belongs to people who know how to use AI to increase outcomes. And if you know how to do that, if you understand how to do that, then you're going to be employable, or you can employ yourself.
And let me layer that with college credits. You talked about college, and I happen to be a member of Tiger Bay, and I was at a lunch, and President Marva Johnson spoke at this lunch. Now, this is something that you all probably know, something that it would be new to me because I don't work in higher education, but what she was saying is the students that are most vulnerable right now are the sophomore first semester students. She said that 60% of people drop out then. Now think about a person dropping out in their second year, having student debt, not having a degree, so not potentially being able to find employment immediately, and definitely not having a microcredential, right? So let's think about how we could potentially integrate both of those ideas. Why wouldn't a university integrate some micro-credentialing or some professional training into their curriculum so that if the same student drops out in the first semester of second year, that they would at least have something in their back pocket to be marketable?
And I think that's happening more and more. I teach market solutions to social problems class, and part of that class is they get an Oxford certificate in systems thinking. So I'm very connected with Oxford and their systems thinking program, and I get 200 potential certifications from Oxford, and they have 6 modules, and I go through the modules with them, and I've built into Feedback Loop AI the iteration process so they can iterate and come up with better outcomes. And then once that they complete all the modules, I send Oxford their final project, and Oxford reviews it. And if it hits their standard, then all of a sudden they have a LinkedIn, hey, I got an Oxford certification in systems thinking.
Perfect.
And you were mentioning like stakeholders earlier, and that's part of that world.
Absolutely. And I've interacted with the College of St. Mary's in Omaha, Nebraska, and they have a master's in science organizational leadership, and they've integrated the certified change management professional into their course so that, of course, the person comes out with the master's degree as well as the professional credential.
Yeah, and this is something that I also in the grad classes that I teach. There's something called the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI. It's basically a framework to report on a company's scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, like their carbon emissions, their water usage, their electricity usage, and things like that. And I've made a partnership with them where my grad students not only get the credit for my class, but they come out with a GRI certification. And I believe layering these certifications on, and eventually, on a degree, it becomes an extremely powerful combination for someone going out and looking for a job. And my grad students, I was invited to go speak at a conference, and one of my grad students did a lot of the research that I was going to present. And I told her, I said, well, you're going to go with me and you're going to present on stage with me. And she's like, no, I'm not prepared for that. And I said, well, I don't feel right presenting this information because you did the most work on it. You did the heavy lifting. So we went to this huge conference, and she was on there, and she did great. And then a big CEO came up and was talking to both of us, and he hired her on the spot.
You're kidding me.
And she was just so impressive and everything. And I looked at him, I said, well, what about me? And he's like, no, not you. So she and she's still there today. I talk to her all the time. She's doing great. And yeah, so, I mean, there's definitely opportunity, and it goes back to what I tell my students all the time, that in my opinion, your kind of your salary or your salary potential or your income potential is really two things. How well can you present an idea to another human being or human beings in a presentation, and who's in your network? And if you get those two things right, that you're most likely going to be a high net worth individual.
So they say now that, and both of those things we, I'm reinterpreting them from the framework perspective, from the project management framework perspective. And you talk about stakeholder management, or you talk about organizing a project in terms of work breakdown structures to, making tactical kind of the descriptions that you get provided there.
Right.
Project manager, professional project manager, I think on average now makes $135,000, and that's 30% more than for that same person with not having the credential. % more. Same thing with the change management professional right now. Of course, transition and people being able to manage the change is something that to be able to lessen the anxiety is a really valuable skill right now, particularly with the initiation and explosion of AI. And being able to manage that. I think it's a 20% increase for the credentialed versus non-credentialed persons. So really, in essence, my company has become, surprisingly, started, and I still do management consulting work, as half of it is management consulting work, but the other half really is identifying the workforce. It's almost become a workforce development firm. You see, because now I'm identifying from a workforce perspective where the gaps are and being able to fill those in the most rapid way possible without having perhaps the person going through a 4-year degree.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we live in I tell my students, we live in the most exciting time ever. And you weren't alive before the internet, but I grew up without the internet. And
despite my girlish appearance, I was alive.
You were there. Okay.
I was there, and I remember it too.
You remember. It's funny. The kids here at FSU refer to the 90s as the late 1900s.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah.
I remember some students being interviewed and they were saying, well, what's old? And they would say, I think 35 is old.
Yeah. 35 is definitely old. So, but there's so much opportunity now, and as somebody who's kind of just wired as an entrepreneur, I see all these opportunities all the time, and opportunities to innovate. And like for me, like something like AI, I could have never built something like feedback loop AI without Claude and Claude Code. And I can express like my ideas to Claude Code and in a conversational way, just say, what am I trying to create? And it creates the code to do it. And, I was able to produce this, I think, pretty cool tool that's really helping my students and not only helping them achieve better outcomes, but I think teaching them a very important skill that iteration is part of the process, and it's important. And unfortunately, the way that school a lot of time is set up is, I just got to get this project done and get it turned in for the grade. That's not going to be your best work. And your best work is going to be when you test it, you get feedback, you redo it. And so that's my theory or my thesis on it. And I've been really excited about like the results so far.
And you talking about testing and then having to redo it.
Yeah.
That's, I think, where frameworks come into play, because in the big firms, and I would say that uniquely in the big firms, the reason why they are viable for taking over these extremely large, complicated, hundreds of millions of dollars projects, right, technology projects and otherwise, is because they have methodologies that help you cover your own blind spots.
Yeah.
So if you have exactly what you did, the ability to innovate, the ability to critically think, the ability to problem solve, and then you have a framework that you can lean on, that you're not necessarily missing pieces along the way, because missing pieces along the way equals failure, right? That's why projects fail. I think it's the Gartner Institute said that 80% of projects, I think it's Gartner that said 80% of projects fail. They do not meet their intended beneficial outcomes. And so if the extent to which you're able to cover some of those blind spots that you have using something that is obviously globally recognized, the better you are. So I I think that I hit a sweet spot. I think being able to teach on something that I practice, I don't think there's any better reference than that.
No, absolutely. And one of the side benefits that I didn't see, like developing this feedback loop this semester is, I mean, I'm teaching entrepreneurship and I'm teaching them to go out and validate and get feedback, and based on that feedback, do an iteration. So every assignment, I said, I want feedback on what you're using.
Right.
Like, tell me, what is it doing well? What is it missing? And my students basically built it with me based on their feedback. I was getting just this really great feedback that they were giving me. And, I would pay them with a couple of points, extra for doing it.
Right.
And they appreciated it. And they also appreciated when they saw that, like, oh, wow, I'm actually getting better outcomes. I was getting C's before, now I'm getting B's, or I was getting B's before and now I'm getting A's.
Sure.
and things like that. Seeing the value in this iteration process. And also, I think, like me personally, I take critical feedback from AI a lot better than I do from a fellow human. So I think that it has that going forward as well.
Because it's easily forgotten? Is that why?
It
disappears after you do that.
Well, there's no relational history, right? Yeah. There's no, like, I don't think, like, probably my biggest issue with AI, which I coded out of my thing, my feedback loop AI, is AI has a tendency to want to please you and tell you what you want to hear. I was going to mention that. And I coded that out of it. So the feedback they're getting is not like, yeah, that's a great idea, blah, blah, blah. It's totally opposite. Like, it's not mean, but
it's factual.
Yeah, I really, because I was getting the feedback and when I was just testing it by myself, and I'm like, this is like regular AI. So that's when I had the idea of, you know what, I'm not going to allow it to connect to the large language model. I have hundreds of past assignments and hundreds of feedback over the years. I have this huge body of work, and I'm going to basically put it in a strong box and say, you only can pull from this.
Brilliant.
And it is freaky, though. It sounds like me, and it says things like me, and it gives feedback like me. And I basically cloned myself.
It's using your source documentation.
It's only using it. It only uses what I've done in the past.
One of my clients. So right now we happen to be in. We're starting special session in the legislature on Monday, and I think that there's going to be a second special session as well. The budget has not yet passed in the state of Florida, incidentally, in case we weren't aware. So we're coming into a whole new session, and the legislators will be back in town over the next month or so. But really, there's a tool. One of my clients has a tool that literally takes all of the kind of the influx of the House bills and the Senate bills and the appropriations, the budget allocations, et cetera, and in real time is able to, remove, extrapolate, forecast, identify some of the trends, attach it to proviso language, which is kind of like, in simple terms, like the requirements that you have around the budget allocation. And right now, the state of Florida does that via Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah.
So this is something that, in special session, if I don't know if they're going to be using the tool or not, but it's an online tool that's really completely, private tool, black boxed, and being able to identify all of the forecasting, et cetera, for these representatives and senators in town. I think it's a brilliant next step that we'll definitely be seeing being used in our future legislative sessions.
Yeah, it's amazing to me, and like I like to be a futurist and kind of like look at like where things are going and what industries are going to be impacted by what, and by different innovations and things like that. And one thing that I think is going to go away is like maybe not completely go away, but the SaaS model where you got these shrink wrap solutions where everybody has to kind of change their processes based on somebody's SaaS solution, where now, like what I built, I'm like, I'm going to build it based on my processes. And then I built a a portal to this where another professor can basically do what I did, but just by filling out forms and uploading things and making a framework for their type of feedback and things like that. So building something that isn't necessarily like you're waiting for the Adobe update to come and
Right.
they're like, now you have to do it this way, that you can actually, AI allows you to customize it based on your unique feature. I think there's going to be lots of like customized apps basically out there that are really going to be personalized. And I think we're going to see a lot of interesting tools come out and proprietary tools that are really going to increase outcomes in different areas.
And that's part of what I mean by the kind of societal anxiety as it relates to AI, because if things are changing at that rapid a pace, what does it mean in terms of their employment, their job?
Yeah.
And then that's what I also mean by critical thinking. If I were to kind of think about all of the potential tools that I need to learn, because now different AI tools are used certainly for different things. Now, how do I learn all of that in as fast as this is happening? If I'm able simply to understand better some of my higher value skills and then be able to identify what I really should be automating in my job, and then being able to apply a tool to that, as opposed to the opposite, because people right now are, taking these online courses at a frantic pace, being able to identify what, how it's going to help them in their job. But I think it's really a little bit of a backwards way of surviving this new era.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely in the camp that AI is going to be a major disruptor in society. It's changed me, kind of my worldview of how employment works and the role of wealth and things like that. And it's very difficult for me to talk about because I was so firm in the camp of get up early, work hard, and make something of yourself. But there is going to be such a divergence of income and wealth. And I'm kind of in the Elon Musk camp when he talks about not universal basic income, but I think he calls it like universal awesome income, that there's going to be so much wealth created because outcomes and things are going to become so much more efficient that if we keep the old system, we are truly going to have the haves and have-nots like we've never seen before. And there's not going to be introductory jobs, as you alluded to earlier. Like that.
So tell me about the college graduate then today. So 4-year degree. I mean, if in fact I think convocation is happening.
Yeah, right
now, literally right now. By the
is.
way, there was no parking in FSU at all.
No, zero.
So tell me about that person getting their degree right today. What's happening tomorrow for them, in your opinion?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think if you have a certain skill set that you'll be successful no matter what. And again, I mean, like a broken record, but I'll say it again. If you know how to present an idea to another human being in a compelling and interesting way, you're going to be successful. And you can use AI to even make it more interesting and more compelling. And I think curiosity is also a trait that is going to be absolutely necessary. Just our society as a 9-to-5, we work 40 hours a week. We go on summer vacation. We go from school from September to May. My view on that is an antiquated system based on an agrarian culture. We haven't been an agrarian culture for 200 years.
So you would say curious people. And you would say probably creatives. Yeah, well, creatives are going to survive.
I think everybody's going to survive, but I think we're going to have to rethink I think the notion of welfare and SNAP and things is going to have to be radically rethought because there's going to be jobs that are not going to exist that were traditional entry level jobs. And I believe there's going to be incredible wealth creation, not only in our country, but in our world. But I think not to have civil unrest, you can't lock somebody out. You can't lock a whole segment or generations out of economic prosperity, and you have to give them another way. And I think that we're going to have to rethink about, like, what does society look like when we don't need somebody to go and punch out widgets for 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week.
So for now, I would say in the shorter term, tell me what you think of this. I'm curious to hear your opinion. I think in the shorter term, you're going to see, let's say, on average, 20% or 50% of people's jobs being automated. And when that happens, we have a choice, right? We can either make redundant 50%, if it's 50% of the workforce, that particular workforce, or we could expect higher, better, more improved outcomes from that same workforce. And I guess it'll be both. I guess both will happen.
I think both will happen. So one thing that I think is a misnomer is AI is a shortcut, and that it requires you less thought and less time. For me personally, AI actually, everything I do with AI takes longer, but I 10x my outcome. So I don't look at AI to write a paper for me and move on. I look at AI as almost like a partner, test my ideas. Where am I not thinking right? Where am I not being fair? Where and that takes a lot longer in thinking through, like, okay, so everything that I do, including this podcast, has been improved because of AI. I can do, before AI, I was doing this podcast before AI, and it had a certain quality to it because I only could do so much. Now, I believe the quality is much, much higher because I have these AI tools that do some of the redundant stuff that took a lot of time. And now I can concentrate on producing a more creative, more interesting show and put out more content, more clips, more things like that people can digest and learn and share and learn about the show. And since I've been in the past year, this show has grown 313% year over year. And it's just exploding.
Your subscribers?
Yeah, our subscribers and views. Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's just it. And the only difference is, like, it's still, I'm a human here talking to another human and everything, but the end result in the editing, when we're editing it later, AI is going to clean it up and make it a lot better. It's still us, it's still our conversation, but what would take NBC News, 10 people to go and do all these little edits and everything, I can click a button, go drink a cup of coffee, and think higher thoughts and think creative thoughts and think, well, now I have this extra time. How can I make the program even better?
Right.
And that's the way I look at it. I don't look at it as a shortcut at all. If anything, it takes me longer, but I believe everything that I do has better outcomes. And to me, that's what a good tool does, right?
Agreed.
That back in, the frontier days, they would chop down trees and try to make their log cabins and everything. And then they invented saws, and saws produce better outcomes, right? And this is just the nature of innovation, that we would create these tools, and they don't necessarily is it cheating to use a saw? Is it cheating to plug in a circular saw and cut a piece of wood? And so I think framing AI as cheating, can you misuse tools? Yeah, I could use a hammer and break a window. That's misusing that tool. Or I can use a hammer and build you a house. It's just how you want to use the tools.
And the power of the tool.
And the power of the tool. So that's kind of the way I look at it, and as accepting of it. Are mistakes going to be made? Of course. are people going to take advantage of it? But that's not AI's problem. That's
human nature.
That's human nature, right?
So tell me about so it's the first day of first year, and the student walks in and sits down in a course. What would you recommend they start thinking about then for their future for the next 4 years?
Like a first-year student?
For a first-year student. They've just walked into class. They've sat down for the first time.
Yeah.
They're anxious. They're trying to organize their thoughts so that they have a good trajectory over the next 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what you think their value system should be and what they should be focusing on.
Yeah, so this is probably, and it may seem inconsistent with what I just told you, but so I do value education very highly. I think everything can always be improved and tweaked and made better, but I do believe that we're going to be almost moving into a new golden era or age of enlightenment where more people are going to have access to education, and there's not going to be necessarily the burden of having to get food or having to have, work 3 jobs and things like that, because I think the wealth generation is going to be there. Some of the things that could derail that is, you were talking about the legislator coming in, and on the governor's desk right now, there's a bill. It's called SB 484, which is the bill that basically is going to regulate data centers in Florida. Right. And it, in my opinion, has 3 big flaws in it. I think it's the best legislation out of any state by far, but there's 3 kind of flaws in it that I hope the legislature will address. But when you're looking at these kind of things, and it gives people the tools to be able to make better decisions, so we can have better outcomes and have a more informed public. And the more that we have basically wealth, that will give people opportunity to, I think there'll be an explosion in the arts. I think there'll be explosion in just creativity. And I think that there'll be an explosion in just like humanitarian efforts and things like that if we do it correctly.
Doing it correctly is how we're applying policy to that, or how we're applying ethics to that?
Yeah. So one of the big issues right now that many communities are facing, and this is something that I've done a lot of writing on, a lot of op-eds, TV interviews and stuff like that, is just talking about AI companies and utility companies externalizing costs while internalizing profits. So what's happening is AI companies or data centers are going in, and they're putting on the rate payer to increase the infrastructure, which was never designed to move the amount of power that is required for AI, and the simple supply and demand. You go into a community, Tallahassee, let's say generously, is a community of $300,000. One of these hypercenters can use up to 400,000 homes worth of power, which impacts all of us as ratepayers, and the only people who are benefiting are the utility companies and Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg.
Doesn't Bill 484 address that? I thought
it does address it. Unfortunately,
in terms of capping the
it does. You bring your own.
Costs.
It does, but there's some soft language in there, like when feasible and things like that, and it doesn't specify who determines if it's feasible or not and things like that. But I think it goes to a larger question of what I think will not work is big companies externalizing costs on seniors who are on a fixed income. We already have Generation Z who's very disenfranchised already, who think they're never going to achieve the American dream, and we keep on layering more and more barriers to them. And this is just another barrier. It's not a huge barrier, but it is a barrier. And that's why I think that we need to get to a point where we need to I'm a capitalist. I want people to make money and everything, but I don't think it's fair, and I think it's actually dangerous to externalize costs while internalizing profits. And these companies are worth, the past 10, we never had $1 trillion companies. Now, how many do we have? Multi-trillion dollar. Increasingly, the wealth is being concentrated. And again, I'm not talking about wealth distribution. I'm talking about actually leveling the playing field where you don't allow companies to come in and charge grandma and grandpa an extra $40 a month times 100 million people.
But how do you control that?
This is where it comes back to, I'm a laissez-faire libertarian. So, what I'm saying is it's like me not even saying it, but I think technology has brought us to a point where we can't have a laissez-faire approach to it, that we have to put in protections, and our politicians are meant to represent the people. And I know this sounds naive, but they shouldn't be representing the utility companies or the data companies. And hey, I use AI every day. I love AI. I'm an entrepreneur. I love capitalism, but one of the Achilles heels of capitalism is that I can take a shortcut and I can exploit, I can externalize my costs because of legislation, and I can internalize the profits, and I can make myself rich off the backs of everyday working people. And I think society as a whole don't really understand what's happening. I believe that we're seeing the biggest wealth transfer, at least in my lifetime, because of AI and data centers. And our representatives, I think, must stand up and make the language a lot more strict and say, like me personally, I think it should be like the oil companies in Alaska who actually pay the residents. Every Alaskan gets a $2,000 check every year. So it's like, I'm all open for, if a data center, AI data center wanted to come to Tallahassee, I wouldn't be protesting it against it. What I would be saying, let's have a transparent conversation about the pluses and minuses, protect the ratepayers, because you guys are going to be making the profits and you need the extra infrastructure. We don't. We're fine. My lights go on and off. I don't need it. You need it. So you need to pay for it. The way I understand entrepreneurship, and I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, is if I have an idea, I risk my own capital or my investors' capital willingly. Mm-hmm. I put it at risk with the hope that I'm going to get a return on investment. And it's not capitalism when you risk other people's money and you take the profits. That's something completely different.
I agree.
Now you got me on. On my soapbox.
I didn't mean to get you hot like that.
So, I just.
And the other thing too is, things are either going to be fantastically optimistic, or utopia, like you describe, or it's going to be catastrophic.
Yeah.
But I do think, I really do, kind of bringing us back to nobody is going to save us here. So it's really a matter of having the clarity of thought to be able to identify, you being a futurist, identify what you think the future is going to look like and align what your behaviors, what your skill set are. Yeah. We were talking about the day one of the first year student that's coming in here. It's really looking at what do they think the future is going to look like in 4 years from now, and being able to skill up in that way. So back to, the fact that SOAR teaches professional credential or training for credentializations. That's really what we're trying to do, is close the gap between what we need and what there is, and being able to do it in such a way that it's applicable, the training or the frameworks are applicable to a multitude of things. We talked about integrating some of these credentialization training programs into the credit schools. The business school is a perfect example of where potentially that could happen with the project management or the CAPM. And then the organizational leadership courses, obviously, for the change management. The technology schools here that you have, being able for Agile and other Lean Six Sigma and all the others that they have, putting those credits, those certifications in the for-credit education, I think, is probably a nice thing to do, a good thing to do. And, you said that other universities are doing it, certainly not to the extent that they should be, really.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of innovation happening in universities. I think some people are trying to put their head in the sand, but I also think that there are a lot of forward thinkers here. And, I definitely don't want to paint a picture that especially FSU is like, no, we're going to do it this way and we're not going to change. I don't see that actually at all. I see a lot of creativity. I see a lot of embracement of AI, especially in the College of Medicine, and they're doing some really interesting work over there, and then definitely with our entrepreneurs and things like that. So, I mean, I believe in 10 years, our society is not going to be recognizable to what we view today. I'm okay with that. Like, I think that this can be a net positive for everyone if we do it correctly. If we allow the robber baron system to continue, then it's gonna end horribly, because you can't just box people out of prosperity and have one group eating caviar and the other dog food. It doesn't work long. And especially the larger that group is, there's going to be disenfranchised. And Gen Z is disenfranchised. And I think that we need to wake up that what the boomers did and Gen Xers did, in some of the legislation that they passed, they've basically boxed out a whole generation of achieving the American dream. But I think we have an awesome opportunity with AI as an innovation to rethink how we're going to do this, because there's going to be plenty of wealth around. And I'm not a Bernie Sanders liberal who says, there shouldn't be any billionaires or anything like that. If you can be a billionaire, great. Just do it honestly. Don't steal.
Do it yourself.
Yeah. And don't and I mean, I know that there's people out there who have the mindset, if I can do it legally, through loopholes and take advantage of you, that they're perfectly fine with that. I think our legislators need to be smarter than that to build better legislation, which AI definitely can, and find these loopholes. There's at least 3 loopholes in SB 484 that I caught in 30 seconds.
Who's the sponsor? Do you know who the sponsor for that bill is? Because that would be great to be able, I hope that he or she is listening to this.
Senator, oh gosh, you got me. I do know the name.
Miller?
And
is it Miller?
It might be. It is slipping my mind right now. You got me. But anybody listening
can add an addendum. You can add an addendum just because I would love that person listen to this podcast.
Yeah, it was a great bill when it was written. It just has been watered down and watered down, and to the point where I still think it's the best bill out of any state. And I think if we can tighten up the language a little bit, and I say we, I mean, I don't have anything to do with it, but I mean, I write a lot and I talk about it a lot, but I just, it's funny because I'm kind of never really been hyper political, and this issue has definitely it's really woken me up. And it's hard because I am a capitalist, and but I don't think what we're seeing is true capitalism. And I love AI. I'm not anti, technology. I think AI is a net positive. So it's kind of like, but I do think that capitalism with guardrails against bad actors is absolutely necessary.
Mm-hmm. There was a bill. There was a House Bill 1197 that died. Actually, it wasn't passed this year, and hopefully it'll come back another year. But really talking about the way that state government is procuring from vendors as well, and that becomes problematic as well, because vendors aren't necessarily identifying how to transition out and for the state to be able to pick up and take over some of these very large technologies. So what we'll see probably next year is also a cleanup in the way that the states are procuring technology, including AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And while you were talking and you saw me looking, I did not remember. I just looked up. So Senate Bill 484, Republican Senator Byron Aval.
Okay.
Is that how
okay.
you say his last name? Out of Miami. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So it's not Blanco.
No, it's not
Because
Blanco. It's
Blanco is
Avila. So
Avila.
Avila. So Brian Vila had a great bill, and it's still a good bill. It needs
Tweaking.
some tweak. It needs to be untweaked. It needs to go back to its original.
I love the fact that we've hit on a topic that you're so passionate about. Do you talk about this every podcast?
I don't, but it flows out of me.
I'm thrilled to be the one that it flew out. Flew out of.
It is something I'm very passionate about, and it really, again, doesn't have anything to do with AI or data centers. It comes down to kind of my core thesis is that it's not capitalism if a big company externalizes their costs and internalizes the profits. I think it's fundamentally unfair. I think it's fundamentally un-American, and I know we can do better. And I think if we don't get it corrected, we're going to end up in a very bad societal place is what I see down the future. So, and I'm around 20 somethings every day, and I want the best for them. I want the best future for them, and I'm going to fight for them. So there we go. So we have been going on, and I didn't. So we're going to go back to the original thing of this podcast and talk about your business, but your business does all.
I think we've integrated all of the pieces and parts of my business all throughout this conversation. I mean, it's really been fascinating, but really that's what we do, right?
Yeah.
That's what we do. How do you close the skills gap while being flexible enough to be able to accommodate a future that we don't necessarily know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And microcredentialization, I think, is one way of doing that.
I think it is a fantastic way of doing it, and I'm excited that you're doing it, and I think it's extremely important. So before we close out, I do know that you went to the Jim Moran Institute and the Small Business Executive Program, right?
That's right. I was accepted into that program.
Very good.
A 5 year It was a 5-week intensive program. I mean, really, they had guest speakers come in. They talked about HR issues and, being careful there and understanding some of the implications of certain things that we do. Financial individuals, bankers were there. We had media specialists, subject matter experts in. Really talking about strategy, business strategy. But I think what was most advantageous is the fact that I was sitting with maybe 17 other entrepreneurs in the city here and being able to share some of our vulnerabilities, some of the areas that we have blind spots, talking about blind spots where they are, and people providing their opinion for that. I'm a new grad, and I'm anxious to start the peer-to-peer program that
Which
JMI.
is a great program,
Yeah, I'm very excited to start that, and that's basically continuing the discussion with other like-minded entrepreneurs to be able to make our businesses as successful as possible, which will only benefit this community.
No, that's fantastic. So I like to finish up the podcast with just a couple of questions. The first one is always about mindset. This is the InNOLEvation Mindset podcast, and I've written a series of books, the CEO's Mindset Reset. So I believe mindset is one of the most important things for an entrepreneur and CEO to get right. And so in your day-to-day grind, where the tendency is we get pulled into the nitty-gritty, the latest, putting out the latest fire, and it can be exhausting. What kind of things do you put in place to make sure that your mindset is looking toward the future, that you're keeping the main thing?
There's a lot of main things, but I would say let's say I boil it down to one value that I have, and it's really the individuals that work with me, my staff, we all have the same common vision. And if you haven't established a clear definition of what you're doing and why you're doing it, the purpose of what you're doing, and for me, again, it's not only revenue generation. Yes, this is how I eat. This is how I live. Yes. Right. But really that's why I've kind of transitioned more to a training professional or a management consultant to really looking at a workforce development individual and being able to close those gaps. So to me, that's having that vision to be able to do that continues to keep our focus very clear. The other thing, too, I remember years ago, someone said to me, just kind of innocuously saying, well, being a consultant, half of it is confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, really? Is it? So I really thought about that, and I thought, it really is, but it's confidence with some skill behind it, right? And it's the skill, if I were to kind of simplify or boil that down to two value systems or maybe methods of doing something, it would be really thinking well and doing well.
Okay.
And I think if we think and if we do well, whatever is in our control will at least be on a positive trajectory.
Nice. And I always finish the podcast with this question. And the question is, if you could go back and tell yourself one thing before you started SOAR, what would be the one thing you would tell yourself?
I would tell myself that being an entrepreneur is harder than anticipated, than I expected. It's more work. I know that everybody says that, but it's more work than I had anticipated. But it's much more interesting and thrilling and exciting and flexible than any other career or quote-unquote job that I've ever had. So I wouldn't change my life right now for anything.
All right. Awesome. Thank you for that. I'm glad it wasn't don't go on the InNOLEvation podcast and listen to Mark rant about AI centers. So.
That was fascinating, Mark. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the InNOLEvation Mindset Podcast powered by the Jim Moran College of Entrepreneurship. Hey, if you like this episode, and how could you not, be sure to hit that like button and be sure to hit that subscribe so you never miss another amazing episode. And hey, we read all the comments and respond to them. We love the comments, so keep them coming, and we will see you next time.